have to change my plan. I should have realized there'd be another man. I overlooked that point completely until the big affair began. Before I knew where I was at, I found myself upon the shelf, and that was that. I tried to reach the moon, but when I got there, all that I could get was the air. My feet are back upon the ground. I lost the one girl I found. Myself upon the shelf, and that was that. I tried to reach the moon, but when I got there,
the stories about Charles Sobhraj are as full of contradictions as the man himself. In the media, he's often known as the most notorious serial killer of the 20th century. Yet he has never been convicted of murder. In his own words, he has spent almost 3 decades in jail for passport forgeries and some minor robberies. Charles Sobhraj was born in Vietnam in 1944 to an Indian businessman and a Vietnamese shopgirl. In the 60s, he started his crime spree with armed robbery and swindling in France. This led to a killing rampage in the 1970s in India, Thailand, Afghanistan, Turkey, Iran, Hong Kong, and Nepal. Many of the killings occurred on the so-called hippie trail. He made friends, especially with tourists and backpackers, who could use his help and local knowledge. Then he drugged them, robbed them, he collected their passports and constantly changed identities. Bodies were found later on, drowned, burned, strangled, poisoned. But there was no way to connect the killings to a single identity. He was finally caught in 1976 after trying to drug 70 French tourists at the same time.
No sympathy for this man. He's a devil.
Are you free, Sobhraj?
Born devil.
His jail period in India, Sobhraj was living in Paris as a free man. By then the media was onto him. There were bestseller books, magazine cover stories, TV interviews.
The question first is that whether I committed murder.
Did you?
Don't push it like that.
Then suddenly in September 2003, he turns up in Nepal, where he is still under suspicion for murders that took place 28 years ago. Only after an article in Kathmandu Times reveals that Sobhraj is in town, does the police pick him up.
Non, rien de rien. Non, je ne regrette rien. Ni le bien.
In November 2003, 2 months after Sobhraj's arrest, we flew to Nepal to try and arrange an interview with him. We wanted to find out the truth about the man who spoke 5 languages, who had supposedly killed 50 people, who was known as a Buddhist, a Don Juan, an expert in psychology, a genius, a charmer, a perfect gentleman who would always betray the one who got closest to him. It was time to talk to the man himself. Getting an interview arranged in Kathmandu Central Jail turned out to be a challenge. Even close relatives of the prisoners had a hard time getting a visitor's permit. But there was a back door: money. We had to bribe every ladder of the jail administration to get in. Charles's lawyer, Sanjeev, is our middleman. He loves to handle money. And his new client brings a lot of cash flow. Sanjeev runs errands for Charles. The morning finally arrives when everything is ready to go. Our crew arrives at 6 a.m. in the morning. Because the jailers want to keep the interview secret, they decide to arrange it outside the jail in the courtyard. We are amazed at the lack of security. We're practically sitting out in the open, in the middle of a street. We wait until they let Sobhraj out. Before we start, Sobhraj wants to make sure what questions we ask him.
Okay, first you have to cut it out for 2 minutes. Yeah. You cut it out for 2 minutes. And,
we'll cut off for two minutes before we say, then we roll. Cut!
So, yeah.
The way I would...
Okay, one of the questions that you may ask me is that, I mean, make a little bit dramatic, is that you can ask, do you regret, do you have any regret about your past life?
Yes.
Then to the BBC, then I will say, yes, I regretted part of my life.
Okay.
And you may say, which part? Then I say, a part. Okay. I born in Vietnam, right? And that was in 1944, during just at the end of the war. And then I think that it was at the age of about 7 or 8 that I was sent to France. And then they left me for about 2 years in that pension. And I still remember that when my mother walked in that pension to see me after 2.5 years, she started to talk to me, happily. But I told her in French, I said, I don't understand what you are saying. Because I had completely forgotten the Vietnamese.
We have heard most of this before. He even uses the same words as in previous interviews. We were more interested in his current activities. Why did he come to Nepal? Go.
Well, I was working since the last few years for a French company, a production company, to make the documentary for that company. And I was asked to come here to make a research on the Nepalese handicraft.
Nepalese handicraft?
Yeah. Just once again, stop. I want to take this.
It's on, eh? It's on, okay.
Yeah, come here.
Yeah. Push.
You follow me.
Okay.
Okay. You ask, can I take inside this? Ask permission if I can take inside.
Toilet. This is in toilet. Enough.
One day, one morning, I saw in the paper that I in one of the Nepali paper who said that Charles Sobhraj is here in Nepal, in Kathmandu. That paper has contacted the police and to ask whether a case was pending against me or whatever, and the police has told them that no, there is no case against him. It was 3 days later. I noticed two guys walking, so immediately I detected there was something wrong. And then one of them came to my table and say, hi. He showed me his card. He said, I'm a police officer. I said, yeah, I can see.
I guess I'll have to change my plan.
So I asked the officer, what's wrong? He said, I don't know exactly now, but with my other chief, we'll see in the morning.
I should have realized there'd be another man.
And also, we have to check whether your passport is genuine. I say, of course, my passport is genuine. Because if I tell you I'm Charles Sobhraj, and nobody's going to claim that he's Charles Sobhraj.
I overlooked that point completely until the big affair.
Deputy Superintendent K.C. Ganesh was the arresting officer. Ganesh is trying to build a case against Sobhraj, but most of the files of the 28-year-old murder case are missing.
मानसपटलमा रहेको एउटा केस हो। जब म 12 वर्षको थिएँ, चार्ल्स सोब्राजले घटाएको घटनाको क्राइम सीन म खुद मैले आफूले हेरेको थिएँ। एउटा डेड बडी हेर्ने जसलाई चाहिँ मर्डर गरिएको छ र मर्डर पछि उसको चाहिँ शरीरलाई चाहिँ ग्यासोलिनले चाहिँ जलाएर।
On December 14th, 1975, Connie Jo Bronzik, 28, from Santa Cruz, California, checked into the Oriental Hotel on Freak Street, Kathmandu. Backpackers, dope smokers, hippies of all nationalities met here in the mid-70s to build a better world. Connie made new friends, like Lauren Carrier from Manitoba, Canada. On December 18th, Connie told her friends that she had met an amazing guy, a gem dealer who stayed at the 5-star Oberoi Hotel. On December 22nd, on the road to Dulikhel, near Kathmandu, a local farmer finds the severely burned and mutilated bodies of Connie and Laurent. Connie's ankles were bound together with rope. Her body was naked, her clothes burnt to the skin, her chest randomly stabbed. Biswas Shrestha, a retired inspector who was the investigating officer of the murder case in 1975, interrogated Sobhraj and his wife because the car they were traveling in was spotted near the crime scene.
So we approached the car and interviewed the person, and we saw these photographs, this Laurent Carrier and this Connie Zibronis. And they say, I don't know, like this. So very clever, very clever. So this 50-50 chance, 50-50 chance. So we let him go.
By the time Shrestha was about to arrest Sobhraj, they escaped Nepal. Sobhraj himself denies even being in Kathmandu before 2003.
The only evidence they have got is this. 1, recovery of the people who died. 2, the witnesses who say that those 2 persons they were staying in this hotel. And that one plastic bag was found in the hotel where supposedly they say that I was staying. Besides that, nothing else. No witness, no anything.
In Sydney, we met with David Wilmoth, who claims he met with Charles in Kathmandu on 18th December 1975. David was a backpacker on the hippie trail. Charles introduced himself to David as Alain Gauthier, a gem dealer and a businessman.
He was a very relaxed, charming fellow, slightly flashy, glamorous clothes. He and I were sitting next to each other, just the two of us. I mean, it was very interesting, and after we got there, he said, would we be interested to spend the night at the casino? I was a bit non-committal, so he phoned up and confirmed it and sent a driver around. He gave me $50 when we went into the casino. My recollection was I lost it. But he said, oh, look, this is nice, let's keep talking. Come and have a look at this stuff that he had in his room. He wanted to show us his surveillance gear. He was very proud of his techno gadgets. He said they were bugging equipment, but it was really, basically, one of them was a big, radio cassette player, as best as I could tell. He said, look, I'd like to see, let's get together tomorrow. Basically, he called ahead and said, look, I'm sending a driver around for you. We want to take you up to up the new road, to see this new road built up to the China border. And although that was of interest to me, it wasn't the #1 thing that I particularly wanted to do. So that's why I just decided, no thank you. And the same thing happened the next day, that he called and said, I'm sending a car. He didn't say, would you or wouldn't you? He said, no thank you. I believe that turning down the trip up to the China border did save my life. But the realisation didn't come to me until 4 years later, you know. Somebody was describing me a book he was reading. The book claimed that he'd been in Nepal a few days earlier. Two people had been killed and chopped up into little pieces up on the China road to the China border some days before. So I certainly felt that if I'd gone in that car, that I may not have returned.
After escaping from Nepal, Alain Gautier flew back to Thailand. We traced his steps back to Bangkok, where we met with Nadine Gier, his downstairs neighbor. They were living at an apartment block called the Kanit House. Nadine quickly became friends with Alain and his wife Monique, and often enjoyed their hospitality.
We are like friends, sure. I was more with Monique because she was there all the time, and he was away very often for his business. You know, he would leave the apartment after coffee in the morning. Sometimes he would bring people for his business. But it was trash because it was only backpackers, you know.
It was only much later she found out who Alain Gautier really was and what he was doing. At Kanit House, Nadine heard about a young girl, Teresa Knowlton, whom Alain had invited for drinks.
He talked about an American girl, very nice party with her, talking about very freely about sex and so on. Her name was Teresa.
Teresa Knowlton, a 22-year-old Californian girl, lands in Bangkok. She's on her way to attend a meditation course at the Kopan Monastery in Kathmandu. She decides to spend a few days in Bangkok, in Hotel Malaysia. There she meets a well-dressed, smooth-talking gentleman by the name of Alain Gautier. Alain invites her to Kanit House for a social gathering, mainly composed of backpackers on the lookout for cheap gemstones and traveling tips. Later, she gets an invitation to Pattaya Beach for a weekend sightseeing. On October 18th, the body of Teresa Knowlton is found by a fisherman. At Alain's house, Nadine met with Stephanie Parry, a French girl who was visiting Bangkok. She was later found, strangled. Vitali Hakim, a Turkish man, also enjoyed the hospitality at Kanit House.
He told me he was living in Spain and looked very, like a little bit hippie style with lots of jewelry, silver jewelry. But I saw him, I talked to him maybe 1 hour and he disappeared. That's why I was worried, because I saw his necklaces, everything on the table.
Meanwhile, Kanit House was filling with more guests, and as Nadine Gier discovered, more of them were turning sick, with stomach infections, food poisoning, diarrhea. They were often groaning in the guest rooms of Alain and Monique, who gave them so-called medicine.
We were there and completely dependent from him because they lost their passports and money, and so they couldn't do anything. They had to stay there. I said, you must, you know, bring them bad luck or put a spell on them, because many people coming here, most of them get sick. And he would say, but these people, they eat anything, they are not careful with the water. And
Nadine also met with a young Dutch couple, Henk Pintanja, a PhD student in chemistry, and Cornelia Himker, 24.
I saw them briefly, and then Alain moved to me and said, oh, sorry, go to next door, I'm talking business with these people. And I think the next day I was there and I heard some screaming, and Monique told me the Dutch were sick.
On December 18th, Bangkok Post runs an article about a dead couple found burned and charred in a rice field. The article mistakenly identifies the Dutch couple as Australian. Concerned about the fate of their children, the parents of Henk and Cornelia write a letter to the Dutch embassy in Bangkok, where Herman Knippenberg was working as a diplomat in 1975.
In February 1976, I received by diplomatic post a letter from relatives from the missing Dutch couple, who reported that they were very worried because they had not heard of their relatives for quite a while, and these relatives were very serious and frequent correspondents. The letter of the relative talked about the fact that in Hong Kong they had met a Frenchman, and that this Frenchman after treating them to an evening in a nightclub with a very nice meal, had invited the young Dutch couple to come to be his guest in Bangkok, where he had an apartment and a French cook.
The letter changed Herman's life. Herman agrees to meet us at the Dutch embassy in Bangkok, where his journey to the world of Sobhraj began. This journey would last a lifetime.
After I had received from Holland photographs, recent photographs of the missing Dutch tourists, and after I had received dental records, the driver and myself went to the police hospital. And when I looked around me, I saw bodies stacked up on all kinds of, let's say, operation beds. Then suddenly I heard this cheery voice of Dr. Twijnstra, who was standing in the corner and saying to me, "Yes, Mr. Knippenberg, it's them." And there was Dr. Twijnstra poking with a dental instrument into the mouth of a corpse. Girl was hit over the head with a very heavy item, but she was set to fire when she was still breathing. The man had been strangled and also set to fire. Set to fire, set to fire, set to fire when he was still breathing. And we have the photograph. At the moment of death, he is still reaching out, trying to defend her. At that moment, it made me even more determined to try to put a stop to it, to the extent that that might not be official in my official task, but I said to myself that if I could make the difference, I certainly would.
When Herman brought his file to Graham Stanton, the editor of the Bangkok Post, I remember being absolutely amazed about how much he had found out. I was amazed that a diplomat would have to do as much digging as he had done.
There are 4 books which were written about him. I have, of course, all 4 because I collaborated with the authors. The book by Richard Neville, The Life and Crimes of Charles Sobhraj, was even published in Thai. So of that book, I also have a version in Thai.
You're nobody till somebody loves you.
We called it the Bikini Killings, and I don't quite know why the editors in Hong Kong decided to call it the Bikini Killings, because really the only thing about a bikini was the girl who was found in the sea off Pattaya. There were sort of different types of murders in a sense. There were bodies found. One was found at sea, one was found in a tidal creek, and one was found partially burnt. The Thais kind of tended to look down on these people because they walked around in bare feet sometimes, wore sarongs, you know, and they saw them as dirty, and they really didn't have a lot of regard for them. And I think if some of them died, you know, there was probably a suspicion that it had something to do with their lifestyle. I don't think they had any suspects, no. I mean, you know, these stories of bodies found appeared in the Bangkok Post, and nobody actually, none of us really tried to put it all together, except him.
Dominique Renelot spent almost 3 months as a guest of the Gautier household, lying on their couch with stomach cramps.
I said, "No, why don't you take him to hospital? It's not normal, he gets bad stomach for a month." And they said, no, we know very well about this kind of disease, we can help him here, we don't need to spend money in the hospital. Until he realized that he was drugged, because he stopped taking the medicine she was giving him, and as soon as he stopped the medicine, he was feeling better. He was the one who said Alan was a murderer. The first thing he showed us the Bangkok Post with the photo of the 2 Dutch bodies. He said, "Do you remember these people? They are not Australian, as the newspaper says. It's the 2 Dutch you met before you went to Hawaii. Alain killed them."
It was rather chilling, frankly. And the way they were able to do it with alacrity, I mean, there was just, they seemed to be able to move. There didn't seem to be any problem with authorities.
We were playing badminton in the parking, and Yannick was upstairs with Dominique, and they called us. So we went upstairs. He opened the safe. There was a small safe, and he had the key. And he got out of the safe a paper bag from Foodland with 20 passports.
They were able to, Sobhraj and Leclerc and Chowdhury were actually able to travel on other people's passports, sometimes pretty crudely put together. I mean, they cut the pictures out and inserted their own. One of them actually travelled on I think it was Sobhraj, travelled on a woman's passport. How could that possibly be?
Our logic was not to go to the police because it was an incredible story and we had no evidence, almost nothing.
You've got to start being able to put things together before you can go to Interpol and say, we think we've got, you know, a serial killer on the loose.
So we thought maybe it would be better if the embassies spoke to the police, not us directly.
The Canadians found the connection. The Canadians found that it was Alain Gauthier was Charles Sobhraj because of the address of the mama.
After the bikini article was written with the help of Knippenberg's research, the news tightened around Charles. The Thai police finally had a name and an address.
The next day you came to the embassy and you told me that they had made a decision to go to Europe, and so you said, we have to act fast. And the next day, on the 11th, they made the raid.
On 11th of May, Charles and Monique were arrested by the Thai police, but Charles was not keen on staying in Thailand to wait for an execution. Charles told his friend, confidant, screenwriter Farooq Dondi, how he escaped from Thailand.
Charles Sobhraj was pretty close to conviction in Thailand, which holds definite execution, right? They put you up in front of a firing squad and shoot you. And at the time there was a military government, they do that just like that. And he actually escaped from police custody. I think he bribed people. But when I asked him, how did you get away? He said, the policeman left the room and I walked out. He said, I just stood up, walked out of the door, found the door open, went into the alley and ran. So he got away from there, went down the coast, took a boat, came to India. Once he was in India, he had all these passports with him. So he started circulating as a Frenchman and he took on different identities. And created a bit of mayhem here also.
In New Delhi, Charles was not planning on taking a vacation. In 1976, Inspector Tooley was known as the Sherlock Holmes of India. He was introduced to the case of Charles Sobhraj when he got a call from Vikram Hotel about some 70-odd French tourists who seemed to be poisoned, randomly falling over in the lobby and restaurant of the hotel.
Some of them had vomited, some of them had stomach ulcers about it.
He tried to drug them so as to rob them. And he was caught doing that because the Frenchmen didn't want to leave the bar.
Some of them had to be hospitalized. The others were in a very bad shape.
And they fainted while they were still carousing around the clock. And he was held. And then
20 people became violently ill.
I think a little bit more than 20.
We met with Inspector Tooley, now retired, in New Delhi.
When I reached Vikram Hotel at about dead of night, he was fixed in a chair in the room adjoining the manager's room, and he was furious, shouting absolutely on everybody around that they are committing a big blunder in detaining him. He was dressed very, nicely, wearing a very costly suit, a nice tie, a nice cotton shirt. But since we had the statements of some people whom he had given some tablets in the garb of an treatment for, these stomach diseases, we decided to arrest him. and he was put in a lockup. And then brought him to my office in crime branch and started trying to talk to him about his real identity. But he was not coming around. He kept on saying, well, he's a rich French gem dealer and he's around on a world visit. He has a big business in Paris and in Bangkok. He has an apartment there. And he kept on this behavior for a very long time. He refused food. He said, nothing than less than 5-star food I can't take. I said, okay, we'll get you some food. We sent a man, got some sandwiches from Sobhraj Hotel. He was a little cooled down. He was a great player of yoga and he will sit in a trance for hours to come. He will not speak. He will not reply to any of our questions. We knew the story, what had happened. He was accompanied in Agra where he got into this group. And there were 3 very beautiful young girls with him. We were able to place them. The girls were in the Narula Hotel in Connaught Place. We searched their baggage. Some photographs were recovered. Out of those, there was a small photograph of a child. When we cornered those girls, who is she? She said, probably this is the daughter of Sobhraj. I had that photograph with me at that time when we were questioning him. Seeing that he is a very hard nut to crack and he's not coming up with anything, I adopted, a soft approach. I said, okay, let us forget your crimes. Are you married? He said, yes. Have you got some children? He said, yes. I took out that photograph of his daughter. I said, who is she? Oh, she's my daughter. I love him, she loves me. He started cursing and some tears came out of his ears.
This was the defining moment in the career of Charles Sobhraj. Out of all people, a police inspector, a bureaucrat, managed to play the player and have the devil itself confess.
And then they found out that he was Sobhraj.
Well, I was arrested in 1976 under various charges, including of murders.
And he, meanwhile, had read up the books, saying if you're convicted in India, you have to serve your sentence before being extradited to Thailand.
And so I went through trial and all that. And
the Thai law says, after 20 years, a murder trial can't be revived. You're free. Statute of limitations. So he thought, safest place for me, Indian jail.
Well, it took about almost 20 years because the Indian legal system is quite lengthy.
Now, nobody thinks like that. It takes a psychopath to think, what will I be doing in 20 years' time?
And what you would do is pick a person or a couple, drug them.
Yes, that's correct.
Take their passport and any valuables they might have and move on.
That's correct.
How many times do you think you did that?
I did so many times as I've had.
20? 120?
Maybe 100.
A male American by the name of John was shot with a pistol in the heart twice. André Bruniot was drugged and kept under in the bathtub. Stéphane Paris was found drowned, burning, mutilated, strangled, an overdose, stabs with a sharp knife, suffocated, neck was broken, set to fire, cerebral hemorrhage, and there was the taxi driver. What is it, who was bundled up in the back of the car.
And there are now about 45, 50 placed at his door. People, who died in hotels where he had been, or people who died of food poisoning after having some contact with him. Nobody knows that he did it because there's no He's never been convicted in a court of law of murder.
I was accused of 2 murder cases, right? One in Delhi and one in Benares. In the Benares case, I was found guilty. The judge asked me, what do you have to say about your sentencing? Then my reply, and the word press was there, I say, I want death sentence. He said, no, but we are not going to give you death sentence. We are not prejudiced against you. I say, no, I want death sentence. Because I say I feel I'm innocent. Why also? Because in India, the appeal is quite lengthy. And if you have a death sentence, you can have your case heard very quickly. Anyway, but he gave me life. Then what I did after 3 days, I sent a letter to the Chief Justice of the Allahabad High Court saying that from today, I'm starting a hunger strike till my appeal will be heard. The hearing started. For 2 days, I took the top lawyer of the state, UP, Uttar Pradesh, and the case was shifting on the side of the prosecution. When I saw that, I say to my lawyer, I said, please, can I talk to you? We went down out in the corridor. I said, listen, I pay you the money, right? But now I feel that the case is slipping out of your hand, so I'm going to handle it. They put the best of their lawyers against me. Their hearing went on for 1.5 months, the argument day to day. And finally, the court found that the man died of natural death.
Charles's accomplices joined him in jail, including Monique, whom Charles claimed to be his wife and a TV star.
He was reposing a lot of confidence in her. She was absolutely acting like a partner with him in all those crimes.
Monique, or Marie-Andre Leclerc, fell in love with Charles Sobhraj in May 1975.
She was a nurse and she knew the medicura and pharmaceutical preparations. She was a great asset to him in that part of the crime.
In August 1975, Monique left her life behind in Montreal and moved to Bangkok to live with Alain Gauthier, whom she described to her friends as mysterious, exciting, sexy, dangerous, all that she was looking for. She got more than she bargained for.
I need your love. Every day I need love. Every way I want love. Without your sweet, sweet love.
One day she said he wants me to have a baby, but I don't want to have a baby from him. It would be a monster.
Many stages she said she wanted to leave, but she could not leave.
She couldn't. She had no passport. She had no money. She said, he will find me if I go away. He will find me and kill me.
Your love is tough.
Charles Sobhraj knows women. Women, for some reason, want to know Charles. During his time in Tihar, at least 5 women fell in love with Charles and wanted to marry him. The first one was an American PhD, Sharon Walker.
Sharon Walker, one lady came and she never came to defend. She what I know, she wanted to marry him, but that was not allowed.
Even his female lawyer, Sneh Sangar, fell for his inexplicable charm.
He got married several times in jail. So every third lady he meets, he wants to marry him.
Jacqueline, how and when did you fall in love with Charles?
Last year. Are you looking forward to getting married soon?
Oh, yes. We have got our divorce papers. I'll have to take care of my fiancée.
And he lets you use his office.
Yeah, that is correct. Even he put a bed there.
So that you can make love to your girlfriend.
You know, such kind of thing is always in private.
I don't think I had so many relationships with women. Few only. Yeah. Because when I get attached to one person, then I really get attached deeply.
Yes.
And sincerely. You know, I cannot, for example, go with a woman just for sex. I have to feel something, I have to...
Charles Sobhraj demonstrating his manhood. You should have seen the color photograph of it.
Your love is so important to me.
Well, the devil has its own charm.
Carol Kershaw was a young woman living in Australia when she read Richard Neville's book, Life and Crimes of Charles Sobhraj. This book convinced her to write to Charles, who subsequently invited her to meet him in Tihar jail.
Well, I guess it just started off as you know, curiosity and as a friendship, and then, you know, we sort of, the feelings sort of got deeper, I suppose. Sometimes, you know, there's a lot that can be written in letters that words aren't spoken, you know, so every time I get a letter from you, it makes me happy for a few days. Write to me often. Why didn't you tell me about your birthday? Didn't I have a right to know? Could I send a photo? He did some drawings at one stage for me. There's a letter somewhere from his mother. Oh, there was the jewellery. There were some flowers as well, which I have dried. I'm so excited about seeing you, I don't recognise myself anymore. And you're the one that's changed me like that. Yeah. August, September, you know, like every week, every 2 weeks. Sometimes there'd be 3 or 4 letters a day. And that continued through until January 1981, when I went to India and decided to go and visit him there. I was really surprised when I first saw him because I didn't expect him to be so small. Yeah, I think we sort of fell in love, but, you know, what's love like? You know, when you're 25 years old too, you know. He did ask me to marry him, and we actually filled out a certificate. When I actually told my parents that I'd met him, and they were horrified, and they threatened to take my daughter away from me. I really didn't think my father was a very good judge. He was an alcoholic and he was living with a woman who was 2 years older than me. I stayed there for 3 weeks visiting. I was able to visit every day except Sundays. I used to run messages for him, go and buy food for him. I went to court with them a few times. He wanted me to go and speak to some journalists. I just found it very exhausting. You know, it was quite tiring going backwards and forwards all the time. I think I just said to him, look, I can't do this anymore. And I walked out. And I didn't go back. I've never met him since. I've tried for a month now to forget Charles, but it's not possible. There's too many memories and reminders. It is now 1 week since I received a letter from Charles asking me to no longer write to him, for he has married an American girl and no longer needs me. I guess if he changes his mind, I could still be waiting. Okay, I still care about him and I wish him well.
While we interview her in a
Hello?
hotel in Sydney,
Yes.
she gets a call from Charles. Charles has heard about our visit to Sydney and is eager to know what she's telling us.
Pardon? What did we talk about? We talked about how I met you. No, I wouldn't. No, I didn't. No. Not publicly.
We could find only one man who genuinely believes he's a friend of Charles Sobhraj. Former Indian Army Captain Rathore was Charles's jailmate in Tihar. In 1996, Rathore paid Charles his bail.
When I entered Tihar, the Charles aura was already existing in Tihar. People talked about this fellow. And I saw from a distance initially, you know, he used to roam about in the jail like a king.
Rathore had been jailed for false treason charges and now needed a helping hand.
Everybody was afraid of him, including the jail staff.
Well, the Indian press, they started to call me the king of Tihar jail.
He used to tape conversations. Then he tried to blackmail the jail staff.
If you meet him, if you look at him in the first go, nobody could, you know, imagine that this person could be deadly. He's so soft-spoken, so nice-mannered, intellectual. You can discuss anything with him. He's a genius, there's no denying the fact. But he's put his genius into a bloody wrong side.
Turns out Sobhraj wrote a thesis about Jean Genet and numerous other short stories and books.
He's written a book called Chandraesh. I don't know whether it's published or not. That is about the Indian woman and the dowry system of India. It was so fascinating book, very beautiful book. I used to type that for him.
But even in Rathod's case, Charles couldn't resist a practical joke.
You know, he had two tomcats, one called Mina and another was Tiger. Where he had drugged one of them. And he wanted to use the same drug on me also, possibly. He offered me a toffee. But I could read that in a twitching, it's a split second on his lips. Mischievous, that thing. I opened that toffee, you know, broke the toffee, and there was something. He just wanted to test the drug. It was a harmless drug, but he wanted to see the effect. He used to do it with everybody.
Sobhraj finally got a chance to test the impact of drugs on a massive scale when he decided to escape from Tihar jail in 1986. One day before the escape, the Home Minister of India had personally checked the jail for safety, saying that
I have visited the jail and the security, and I was special commando, and he was saying that even not a rat can go in or out.
I see.
And the next day I met that thing.
He escaped from Greece, he escaped from Afghanistan, he escaped from Iran, he escaped from Kathmandu, Nepal, he escaped from Thailand. Many jails he had escaped.
This gentleman, he escaped in my time when I was Deputy Commissioner of Police Crime. It became a very sensational case.
Amod Kant, Joint Commissioner of Police, New Delhi, was in charge of the jailbreak case in 1986.
And I must admit that the administration of Tihar jail had become quite lax at that time.
Everybody's coming, going, coming. Nobody was bothering who is coming and who is going.
And for no rhyme or reason, this man was taking advantage of it.
From July 1985 to March 86, it was a long time.
Ajay Singh was living in the same cell with Charles and the other prisoners who escaped. Knowing too much about the plan, he was forced to escape with them.
He gave it the name of Operation Dog Training.
I managed to, with a team of three people, three prisoners.
What they really did was every Sunday, they cook a meal inside the jail. So they made a situation where all the guards would look forward to having lunch, from their kitchen.
At some times, they were asking for whether you are having something to eat, and it became a routine matter.
And what he did that he wanted to celebrate birthday. In that context, he mixed up this tablet into that sweet dish, which he prepared himself, as he says.
Jail warders and head warders, they joined it.
The guards, the jailers, the security staff.
They enjoyed the meal.
And 40 minutes later, they were all snoring.
They were already lying this. One was sitting on the chair, and the hands were, another one was like this, and the saliva was coming out of his mouth.
And then in that state of mind and body, this gentleman, he escaped with his team, with his group, and that is what he did.
And then one British man, David Hall, came in. And he took snap of everyone who was sleeping.
And then the entire escape scene, he was continuously photographing.
When we were sitting inside the car, I noticed one of the Tamil Nadu security person who was posted on the Burj. He was looking towards us. So Charlie, hello. He waved his hands like this, and he also waved like this. From Sona, we took some petrol. From Alwar, we purchased some clothing. We left that particular car at the station, got into the train. from Navsari. He has arranged some boats. From through that boats, they have to cross the borders, Indian borders, and to go somewhere else.
He was wanted in some cases in Bangkok and abroad. And for that reason, perhaps he wanted to have a case against him. He wanted to escape and get caught.
Yeah, it was my intention. Because at that time, all the cases was over, right? And I wanted to stay some more time.
I guess I'll have to change my plan.
It was about 20 days later that I was captured in Goa.
I found myself upon the shelf and that was that.
And because of that, I stayed till 1997.
After the statute of limitations in Thailand expired in December 1995, Sobhraj started preparing an aggressive legal case to secure his release.
When he was released, he was rearrested. He was taken in by the Indian security forces and chucked into a detention center, not a jail, because he didn't have a passport.
The government did not want him to be out on the streets. They claimed he was a threat to national security. They just didn't want him outside giving television interviews.
He wants to be news. That is one very important point.
He was capable of saying anything and exaggerating everything.
He will die of anonymity, I say.
Every news channel, international press, Indian press, everybody was in the court. Time magazine, you name it, they were there.
He went to the French embassy saying, look, I'm a French citizen by birth because my mother was Vietnamese under French occupation.
The French, they refused to take me back. They say I was not French.
They just said no. I mean, they started questioning his nationality. They said, we don't know he's French.
So he was kept in detention and in limbo for several days, 25 days, I think. Then something very strange happened.
While the pourparlers was going on with the Indian government, who were pressing the French to take me back, 5 Frenchmen, sailors, got arrested in south of India.
European big boats, they come into the Indian coastal waters and they catch huge, because they're mechanized trawlers and they can catch huge amount of fish. What they did was they put them under the Secrets Act.
And the police arrested them, the security guards took them in, and the Indian Home Office said, we're going to try these guys as spies.
The idea is to put a scare into people and make sure that they don't come near the coast,
French media, who was of course attacking me, that how can India release a person like Charles Sobhraj and then keep 5 innocent people for spying charges?
So they said, we'll make a deal, You release these 4, we'll take Sobhraj.
That's how he got to France,
So once you go back to France, what are the first things that you intend to do?
The first thing? Well, at first I was busy with the press.
When he came out of Tihar jail and landed in Paris, he put a paper bag over his head because he'd sold his photographs to a particular magazine.
And then after that I met the lady who has become my second wife, and with whom now I have a child who is 6 years old.
He says that's what matters to him the most. But what seems to matter to him is staying alive and making some money too. He was trying all sorts of things in Paris, trying to get a movie made about himself. He loved the idea of, somebody told him Johnny Depp will play you, and he said, yeah, that's quite right, exactly right. And it was him calling me usually to say, no, listen, you old man. No, just you listen. Yeah? That's how he talks. And you'd have to listen. He'd show me sometimes catalogs of tanks from Kazakhstan and armored cars and say, look at this stuff.
Everything was running smoothly in Paris for 6 years, with family, the media, a business career. Then Sobhraj travels to Nepal in 2003, risking another capture. What was so important in Nepal?
He said, you see, Al-Qaeda and people, they're out of money. And they need cash. So they've forgotten about Islam and everything. They're selling all this stuff. And it's a very good market.
Whatever the truth about Charles's mission to Nepal, prior to his trip to Kathmandu, the Indian Secret Service intercepted a call between Charles and Bablu Srivastav, a powerful underworld don who runs his empire from a jail in India. Charles and Bablu spent 2 years together in a hole in Tihar and became so-called friends. We asked Bablu about that call.
हाँ बात कर लेते कभी-कभी मगर ऐसा कोई मालूम था नेपाल आया है वो ये मालूम चला था नेपाल आया है बाद में अरेस्ट हुआ फिर पता चल गया बस पहले ही मालूम था नेपाल आया है और कभी-कभी बात कर लेते एक्चुअली मैं इंडिया से वो वांटेड नहीं था और ऐसा कोई ऑब्जेक्शन बात भी नहीं है कि उससे बात ना कर सकते हो.
Bablu's lawyer, Deepak Masi, tries to be equally vague about their connection.
What is wrong in it? I mean, Charles and Bablu, they are by no provision on this planet Earth precluded from entering into a business deal. The question is if the object of that business deal was legitimate or not. And since I don't know anything about the deal exactly, I can't say. But anybody, any two person can enter into.
Unofficially, we find out that Bablu has promised to destroy his arch-rival, another mafia don, Dawood Ibrahim, who is not only at the top of the CIA target list, but also runs a global criminal empire estimated to be worth hundreds of billions, and lives in Pakistan under the protection of Pakistani military. We ask ourselves, how does Charles fit into this yet another very messy picture? Charles himself keeps insisting that he wants to make a documentary about Pashmina shawls in Nepal. While in Kathmandu, Charles has given us a mobile number to reach him in his jail cell, where he has 2 mobile phones, a satellite TV, private cook, amongst other things. He claims that he doesn't need money. He has $16,000 in his jail cell, he says. But could we get him the latest Bluetooth microphone for his mobile phone? He also needs to set up an email connection. The conditions are very bad, he writes to his wife, Chantal, in Paris. To promote himself, he shoots 3 videotapes secretly around the jail, and he even makes an interview of himself with his cellmate, John.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, no testing.
So Charles?
Yeah?
How have you been enjoying your stay here in Kathmandu Central Jail?
Well, it's a fuck-up place. Very primitive.
John, we hear, is an American who was caught with $1 million in a briefcase in Kathmandu airport. During our stay in Kathmandu, some American senators arrived to convince the authorities to let him go. But he's going nowhere. He has become a docile pet, running errands for a famous serial killer. Charles has promised to help him with his case. Who could refuse a helping hand from this gentleman?
I want to tell you some of the stuff, and you will think over. Okay. Because that can be a bomb, because we were proposed by a British paper at that time to help Blair.
Later in the interview, Charles suggests ways of making the film more dramatic. He says his friend Farouk has all the details.
Farouk, he proposed me, and he put me in contact with Sunday Time, he told you, I think,
yes,
and one of the Telegraph.
Yes.
That I was ready to say about the red mercury and.
He said, "Well, I was going to Dubai, where I was going to meet an Iraqi man to sell nuclear material to Saddam's agents." So I said, "Hang on, that's a huge story. Tony Blair wants proof that Saddam was looking for nuclear weapons. I've got it."
But now that Iraq is in the past and Tony Blair still has a career, Charles has a more benevolent mission.
Well, I want to continue as I was doing. It means family life, a very happily family life, and continuing with my with the work and traveling and walking. I will say that the two happiest moments of my life was three. My marriage to my first wife, because we met when she was still a student at La Sorbonne in Paris. And when I had my first daughter, and my second daughter. And by the 6 years since I'm out, you see that I live quietly, perfectly, and that's what I want to continue. And then one day I believe that I will succeed to do it. I want to make a foundation. I hope to make enough money one day that I could fund a trust for the poor children in India. You know, the gifted children who cannot reach the higher level of education, and then to help them. So, and this is still my wish.
Sobhraj is an extremely damaged personality. I always wanted to get Charles to say what he had done and what attitude he took to what he had done. Because what fascinates one about a character like that, who's reputed to have killed a lot of people, is how do you kill people? What's it about? Why do you kill people? I mean, aren't you taking any responsibility for snuffing out somebody's life?
When you ask this question from him, he always said, "Yeah, I have never killed good people."
I soon discovered that Master Sobhraj had absolutely no idea of right and wrong.
He would always betray that person who is most innocent, who trusts you.
Victims had one thing in common: they all could have been quite useful to him.
Like a lap, you know, like a kid on your lap, like a woman, you know, who trusts you completely.
The victims all were potential family members of the Sobhraj family, but who were in a hurry.
And then you suddenly kill that person, kill that child, or you betray that person who's trusting you fully.
Teresa and Knowlton had made an agreement to become a nun. Vitaly Hakim was indeed waiting for a consignment to go and summons the post and had to return. The victims all had urgent business elsewhere.
He can't project himself into the mind or the feelings of another human being at all. Everybody is an object. Everybody else is a machine.
The unwillingness or inability of the victims to ally themselves with the family imbued them in Sobhraj's eyes with the issue of rejection, which caused him to exclude with extreme prejudice. Then he robbed as he murdered. He did not want to be ashamed of his madness.
One day I asked him, "Do you believe in God?" He said, "Of course I believe in God." And he went on to say he believes in karma. And I thought, wow, if you believe in karma, you're going to be really low next time round, boss.
Well, basically, you see, I'm a Buddhist. It is also introspection, you know, self-control, always trying to have a harmony within oneself, the inner self, etc. And I believe it is also that philosophy and the practice of Buddhism which have helped me to have a great, you may say, knowledge of psychology and understanding of psychology and human nature, because it is what Buddhism is. In every situation that I've been, even in the worst situation, I have always, instead of the situation controlling me, I have always succeeded to control the situation. Because in manipulating, you may say, the people with whom I was dealing, and as I always say, as long as I have to deal with people, I can always get out of situations.
For almost a year, he tells us that he's about to be released within the next 2 weeks. On August 12, 2004, he's expecting final release. Instead, the judge sentences him to life imprisonment. Sobhraj is outraged.
He didn't even call a single witness. Nothing.
The news, not so good news, huh?
Yeah, quite shocking. You know, being convicted without trial. No witnesses, nothing. Just, and plus, you see, the prosecutor, he did his job because I pay him money. You know, himself, he say, I'm ready to close the case. You know, I pay the judge, I pay the prosecutor. But that guy, I don't know what happened at the last moment, he changed his mind.
Yes.
So we have to decide between the two now. What we have to do. Already, I have contacted my people in Paris. So we can, now, definitely I'm making it. We need a confirmation. Because once I am out, till I reach the Indian border, and I don't know how many days I will know, you have to tell me and inform me because I didn't know.
You're nobody till some.
Okay, Charles Sobhraj, thanks for meeting us.
Do you have any regrets in your life?
Yeah.
You may be king, you may possess the world and its gold, but gold won't bring you happiness when you're growing old. The world still is the same, you never change it. As sure as the stars shine above, you're nobody till somebody loves you. So find yourself somebody to love.
For the people who see this interview, what would be the message or impression you would like to leave behind?
Well, I believe it is to the people to judge, not me.
Is it
not me to say?
You think
how they have to see
Do you
me.
think you're a misunderstood, misjudged character in the media?
I believe so.
Find yourself somebody to love.